How is it that we have built an artificial intelligence capable of rendering high-definition feature films, composing flawless neoclassical symphonies, and drafting incredibly complex corporate merger agreements in a single collective breath? Yet this world-altering digital brain cannot actually run, because a local substation in rural Ohio has a physical meltdown the second someone plugs in a toaster. This is Critical Path, where we explore stories and innovations about our global supply chain that connect our world to your everyday life. Welcome to the Gigawatt Hostage Crisis. We are currently living in a world where the ultimate, world-altering digital brain is being held hostage by a humble copper wire. You see, historically speaking, standard enterprise data centers were relatively modest creatures. They were quiet, unassuming buildings that required a highly manageable 32 megawatts of power capacity to keep their standard server racks humming and their cooling fans spinning. They were the gentle herbivores of the digital ecosystem. But today, specialized generative artificial intelligence token factories are an entirely different beast. They demand upwards of 80 megawatts for a single facility, more than doubling their historical appetite. And the hyperscale campuses currently in the development pipeline are being designed to draw hundreds of megawatts. That puts their individual power needs on par with medium-sized cities. Just to put this terrifying growth into perspective, former Google Chief Executive Officer Eric Schmidt testified before Congress that the tech sector would require an additional 29 gigawatts of power by the year 2027, and a staggering 67 gigawatts by 2030. If the global network of data centers were consolidated into a single nation, its energy consumption could reach 1,050 terawatt-hours by the end of 2026. That would make the Internet the fifth largest energy consumer on Earth, sandwiched uncomfortably between the entire nations of Japan and Russia. Now for the elite cohort of United States hyperscalers, companies like Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta, money is absolutely not the bottleneck. These tech giants collectively deployed approximately $443 billion in capital expenditure in 2025 alone, with projections soaring to an astronomical $602 billion in 2026. Approximately 75% of this capital is dedicated entirely to artificial intelligence infrastructure. But here is the hilariously tragic punchline to all of this spending. Having hundreds of billions of dollars in cash is completely useless if a developer cannot physically plug their server racks into a wall outlet. Grid interconnection queues across the United States have backed up by up to a decade. You heard that correctly. A 10-year wait line just to get permission to connect to the power grid. This has left fully funded, shovel-ready data center projects stranded in a bizarre state of regulatory and physical purgatory. This tension reached a spectacular boiling point on July 4, 2025, when President Donald Trump signed Public Law 119/21. This piece of legislation was officially titled the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Yes, that is the real name, and we will be referring to it as the OBBBA for the sake of our own sanity. The OBBBA fundamentally rewrote the federal tax code, establishing a massive fiscal incentive for capital deployment while simultaneously taking a sledgehammer to clean energy subsidies. Data center operators suddenly found themselves facing a terrifying series of regulatory cliffs. They had to navigate federal tax rollbacks, soaring state utility rates, localized municipal bans, and a federal grid operator struggling to maintain basic reliability. Surviving this landscape required more than just standard real estate underwriting. It required a radical, witty, and highly calculated reimagining of corporate capital allocation, energy procurement, and regulatory arbitrage. Let us take a nice, leisurely stroll through the fiscal playground of the OBBBA, a law that brought a highly lucrative carrot and a rather brutal stick. For data center developers, the most immediate and profound policy change in the bill was the permanent restoration of 100% first-year bonus depreciation under Internal Revenue Code Section 168K. Under the previous phase-down schedule established way back by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, bonus depreciation had begun a slow, agonizing slide toward irrelevance. It dropped to 60% in 2024 and 40% in 2025, with a trajectory pointing straight towards zero by 2027. The OBBBA abruptly halted this decline, restoring 100% bonus depreciation retroactively for qualified property acquired and placed in service after January 19, 2025. In February 2026, the Internal Revenue Service released Notice 2026-11, providing formal interim guidance that aligned component-level election rules with these new effective dates. Under this highly specific guidance, partnerships and S-corporations can pass these massive front-loaded deductions directly through to their investors. This creates an immediate, high-velocity cash flow engine that acts like financial rocket fuel. The OBBBA also expanded Section 179, increasing the immediate expensing cap to $2.5 million and elevating the phase-out threshold to $4.0 million, providing massive write-offs for specialized modular builders. However, the fiscal generosity of the OBBBA was financed in large part by the aggressive dismantling of federal clean energy incentives. The law terminated popular consumer and residential energy credits years ahead of their scheduled expiration. The Energy-Efficient Home Improvement Credit under Section 25C and the Residential Clean Energy Credit under Section 25D were terminated entirely for any property placed in service after December 31, 2025. The Clean Vehicle Credit, which previously offered up to $7,500 for electric vehicles, officially expired for vehicles placed in service after September 30, 2025. Home electrification rebates, designed to subsidize high-efficiency upgrades, were eliminated entirely before they could even launch. In the commercial sphere, the Section 45Z Clean Fuel Production Credit was restricted exclusively to feedstocks grown or produced in North America, while negative emissions rates were prohibited entirely unless derived from animal manure. That is right. The only acceptable way to achieve negative emissions in the eyes of the tax code is through literal cow poop. The broader macroeconomic consequence of this tax package is a massive structural increase in the federal deficit. Dynamic modeling from independent budget groups projects that the OBBBA will increase the national debt by between $3.7 trillion and $5.1 trillion over the next decade. By the year 2054, the law is projected to lift the United States debt to gross domestic product ratio by an additional 28 to 45 percentage points. While this deficit-driven stimulus has certainly buoyed retail sales through massive tax refunds averaging nearly $3,500 per return, which has been great news for big-box retailers like Walmart and Target, it has also triggered significant upward pressure on long-term interest rates. This dynamic has crowded out traditional real estate lending, forcing data center developers to seek increasingly creative and self-funded capital strategies. While Washington was busy playing with tax codes, local authorities across the country began to experience severe grid anxiety. As federal policy shifted toward encouraging massive physical development, the sheer physical scale of hyperscale data centers began to clash directly with localized utility limits, water supplies, and the patience of local residents. The primary catalyst for this massive local backlash is the soaring cost of grid upgrades. When a massive, multi-hundred megawatt data center seeks to connect to a local grid, the utility must frequently build entirely new high-voltage transmission lines, expand substations, and procure expensive backup capacity just to maintain basic reliability. Historically, grid operators have socialized these massive infrastructure costs, spreading them smoothly across the monthly bills of standard residential and commercial ratepayers. Essentially, everyday citizens were quietly subsidizing the internet. But the financial consequences of this socialization are finally starting to hit home. In the Mid-Atlantic PJM interconnection region, ratepayers across 7 different states were left holding a staggering $4.3 billion bill for electricity infrastructure upgrades approved in 2024. Upgrades that were approved solely to accommodate incoming data centers. This massive grid strain caused PJM capacity auction prices for 2025 and 2026 to absolutely skyrocket, leading to a projected $9.3 billion price increase across the capacity market. For everyday consumers, this translates directly to monthly bill increases of up to $18 in Western Maryland and $16 in Ohio. To protect their citizens from subsidizing the energy bills of trillion-dollar tech conglomerates, state lawmakers have pivoted sharply from offering unconditional tax incentives to demanding total developer accountability. In 2025, More than 200 data center-related bills were introduced across all 50 states, with over 40 of them actually signing into law. The momentum accelerated dramatically in the first 6 weeks of 2026, with over 300 additional bills introduced across 30 state legislatures. Many states have reached for the ultimate regulatory emergency brake, the moratorium. Rather than racing to offer the biggest tax breaks, states are pausing new data center permits entirely while they study the grid and fiscal impacts. Let us look at the state-level panic room. Georgia passed House Bill 1012, barring cities and counties from issuing permits through March 1, 2027, all to prevent estimated fiscal losses of $2.5 billion in data center tax exemptions. Maryland passed House Bill 120, which prohibits construction unless facilities co-locate directly with new or existing power generation like nuclear or natural gas. Michigan saw emergency local actions, such as in Ypsilanti, pausing approvals to evaluate zoning and infrastructure limits. Minnesota pushed Senate File 4298, mandating a comprehensive study and establishing separate, incredibly strict water permitting rules. Oklahoma paused permits through November 1, 2029 to study impacts on residential rates and water supply. South Carolina banned permits and incentives through January 1, 2028 to protect residential customers from rate hikes. Vermont paused things entirely through July 1, 2030, specifically targeting artificial intelligence data centers to construct an entirely new environmental framework. Virginia, the undisputed capital of the data center world, pushed a bill preventing local zoning approvals until specific grid interconnection conditions are fully verified. And speaking of the environment beyond raw electricity, data centers have an increasingly glaring Achilles heel: water. In 2023, United States data centers consumed approximately 17 billion gallons of water, with 84% of that allocated to hyperscale and colocation facilities. By 2028, direct water consumption in hyperscale facilities alone is expected to swell to between 16 billion and 33 billion gallons annually. Why so much water? Primarily to run evaporative cooling systems in high-density server halls so the computers do not literally melt. This massive liquid appetite has made water use reporting and permitting a massive regulatory flashpoint, with drought-prone western states aggressively following Minnesota in introducing double-pronged regulatory threats that can dry up a project just as quickly as a power outage. As the grid became highly congested and state-level permitting became increasingly hostile, data center operators began looking for a way to cut the cord entirely. If the public grid could not deliver power in a timely fashion, why not just plug the data center directly into a power plant and bypass the public transmission system altogether? This concept, known as behind-the-meter colocation, became the focus of intense high-stakes regulatory battles. In November 2024, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, also known as FERC, rejected an interconnection service agreement that would have tripled the amount of power supplied directly to an Amazon Web Services data center co-located at Talen Energy's 2,487 megawatt Susquehanna nuclear plant in Pennsylvania. Local utilities protested the deal aggressively, arguing that co-location allowed Amazon to avoid paying for the transmission grid while still relying on it for backup, potentially shifting up to $140 million in annual grid upkeep costs to everyday ratepayers. FERC initially agreed, stating the proposal lacked sufficient justification. Talen appealed the decision, and FERC denied a second hearing in April 2025, leaving the tech industry in a state of absolute shock. Realizing that this grid bottleneck was legitimately threatening national economic competitiveness, FERC eventually took decisive action. On December 18, 2025, the Commission issued a unanimous sweeping order that declared PJM's existing tariff unjust and unreasonable due to a lack of clear, standardized rules for large-scale co-location. Rather than allowing different transmission owners to block these deals arbitrarily, FERC directed PJM to establish a unified federal framework. The technical mechanics of this December 2025 order represent a massive paradigm shift in grid planning. Under the new rules, PJM must provide 3 distinct transmission service options designed specifically for co-located loads that draw primary power from an on-site generator, but still require flexible grid backup. First, there is firm contract demand, the highest priority tier. This is designed for planned rock-solid grid backup with a specific, committed megawatt threshold. Crucially, capacity charges and transmission planning are assessed based only on this contracted backup amount, rather than the entire peak load of the data center. For example, if a developer builds a 1,000 megawatt data center adjacent to a nuclear plant, they can elect to purchase just 100 megawatts of firm contract demand from the grid. PJM will study, plan, and charge the developer solely for that 100 megawatt slice. The remaining 900 megawatts flows directly from the nuclear generator behind the meter, completely insulated from the years-long general interconnection queue. Second, there is non-firm contract demand, a lower interruptible priority tier that acts as an emergency backup. Because the utility can cut off this power during periods of grid stress, it carries 0 capacity charges. Finally, there is interim non-firm service, which provides a temporary bridge to allow limited operations while permanent upgrades are built. To protect existing customers, FERC granted a 3-year transition period expiring December 18, 2028, while grandfathering pre-existing contracts of over 50 megawatts if they were executed prior to December 18, 2025. The regulatory friction did not vanish immediately, of course. In January 2026, the White House National Energy Dominance Council and a bipartisan coalition of all 13 PJM state governors issued a joint statement of principles, demanding that data center developers bear 100% of the infrastructure costs of their own load growth. In response, PJM fast-tracked its own solutions, submitting a formal proposal in February 2026 to establish an expedited interconnection track. This track would allow up to 10 large, shovel-ready generating projects per year to secure agreements in approximately 10 months, completely bypassing the standard multi-year queue to help developers bring their own generation safely and quickly. At this point, a casual observer might look at this dizzying array of regulatory barriers, statewide moratoriums, the death of federal green tax credits, and PJM's 10-year grid queue, and logically conclude that the American artificial intelligence boom is destined to grind to a halt. But this is where we encounter the massive, brilliant revelation of the 2025 to 2026 data center strategy. In a classic case of regulatory jiu-jitsu, the federal rollbacks of the OBBBA, combined with the strict mandates of the states, actually created a highly lucrative, counterintuitive financial arbitrage. Hyperscalers are not sitting around crying about the grid. They are utilizing the restored 100% bonus depreciation from the OBBBA to fund massive, decentralized virtual power plants and bring-your-own capacity arrangements. Under a standard bring-your-own capacity product pioneered by aggregators like Voltus back in September 2025, data centers do not wait for a utility to build a new power plant. Instead, they buy accredited capacity from a virtual power plant made up of flexible, distributed energy resources that already exist on the local grid. We are talking about residential smart thermostats, commercial building air conditioning systems, municipal water pumps, and behind-the-meter battery storage systems. In highly structured capacity markets, capacity is a tradable financial instrument. When a data center funds an aggregator to deploy these local resources, they receive a formal capacity credit. The data center then presents this capacity credit to the utility, essentially saying, "We are adding 100 megawatts of demand, but we have built a virtual power plant that can cut 100 megawatts of peak demand elsewhere on your system." In return, the utility grants the data center an expedited flexible grid connection. The data center gets conditional firm service, meaning full power for more than 99% of the year, while agreeing to use backup generators during the rare 40 to 70 hours of extreme summer heat waves. The mathematical beauty of this entire arbitrage is fueled entirely by the OBBBA's tax shield feedback loop. By utilizing a highly structured cost segregation study, a data center developer can break down a single, massive real estate construction project into its specific physical components. Rather than lumping the entire facility into a standard 39-year real property depreciation schedule, the developer reclassifies 20% to 40% of the build costs into shorter-lived asset categories that qualify for immediate 100% year one write-offs. Let us break down this math very slowly, because it is the secret sauce of the entire global internet right now. Under the modified accelerated cost recovery system, 5-year personal property includes precision cooling infrastructure, power distribution units, busway systems, and raised access flooring. 7-year personal property includes uninterruptible power supply systems and specialized electrical switchgear. 15-year land improvements cover perimeter security fencing and paved access roads. 39-year real property is just the boring stuff like the concrete foundation, structural steel, and the roof. To demonstrate the colossal scale of this tax shield, let us model a brand new utility-scale $100 million hyperscale data center facility. We will assume a corporate tax rate of 35%. Under standard straight-line depreciation, the first-year deduction is calculated using the standard 39.5-year commercial recovery period. That gives a year one depreciation of roughly $2,426,160. Multiply that by our 35% tax rate, and the standard tax savings is about $849,156. That is cute, but we can do better. With cost segregation and 100% OBBB. A bonus depreciation, we reclassify 35% of the asset basis into those short-term categories. That means $35 million is instantly reclassified. The remaining $65 million stays as 39-year property. Your year one deduction for the reclassified assets is the full $35 million. The deduction for the remaining $65 million is about $1,577,004. This brings your total year one deduction under the OBBBA to a staggering $36,577,004. Multiply that by your 35% tax rate, and your immediate year one tax savings is roughly $12,801,951. So that is a net cash flow advantage of $11,952,795 in liquid cash returned to you immediately. By saving nearly $12 million in liquid cash on every $100 million spent, a hyperscaler building a massive $1 billion regional campus effectively claws back $120 million from the federal treasury in year one. This is the exact capital being used to fund those advanced virtual power plant contracts and buy massive plots of land for the next big step, nuclear reactors. Because for long-term, gigawatt-scale operations, even virtual power plants are not enough to satisfy the relentless, ravenous demand of artificial intelligence workloads. This has forced hyperscalers to bypass the public grid entirely, funding a private space race for Advanced Generation 4 Small Modular Reactors, or SMRS. SMRS are highly compact nuclear reactors, capable of producing up to 300 megawatts of continuous, zero-carbon baseload power. Unlike traditional massive light-water nuclear plants that take a decade to build and occupy a square mile of land, SMRS are factory-fabricated, modular, road-shippable, and require a physical footprint of only about 50 acres. Two primary megadeals have established the blueprint for this new, private nuclear paradigm. In August 2025, Google signed the world's first corporate SMR power purchase agreement with Kairos Power, partnering with the Federal Tennessee Valley Authority to bring 500 megawatts of advanced nuclear capacity online by 2035. The project's commercial demonstration unit, the Hermes 2 reactor in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, broke ground in April 2026, targeting criticality by July 2026. Hermes 2 utilizes advanced Generation 4 molten salt-cooled technology. By using fluoride salt coolant rather than high-pressure water, the reactor operates at near-atmospheric pressure, eliminating the need for massive, expensive containment domes and providing passive safety systems that require zero human intervention to shut down in an emergency. Kairos is upgrading the reactor from 28 megawatts to 50 megawatts to deliver continuous energy to Google's data centers in Montgomery County, Tennessee and Jackson County, Alabama. Then, in October 2025, Amazon unveiled its flagship nuclear initiative, the Cascade Advanced Energy Facility outside Richland, Washington. Developed in partnership with Energy Northwest, a consortium of 29 public utility districts, the project will deploy up to 12 small modular reactors within the space of a few city blocks. The facility will utilize X-Energy's XE100 design, an 80-megawatt high-temperature gas-cooled reactor. The XE100 is a marvel of materials science. It is fueled by more than 200,000 Triaso-X fuel pebbles. Each pebble consists of uranium particles encased in triple-layered isotropic graphite and silicon carbide shells, allowing them to withstand temperatures exceeding 1,600 degrees Celsius without melting. Helium is circulated through this bed of glowing pebbles, absorbing heat to produce high-temperature steam that turns a conventional turbine. Because the fuel is gravity-fed in a continuous rotation, the reactor can run without fuel interruption for 60 years. This massive project is backed by serious capital. Amazon's Climate Pledge Fund led a $500 million funding round for X-Energy, followed by an additional $700 million round in November 2025. This momentum culminated in April 2026, when X-Energy successfully went public, raising over $1 billion in an upsized initial public offering priced at $23 per share. To support these advanced builds, the construction process has been completely professionalized. Geotechnical engineers handle shear wave velocity profiling to meet Nuclear Regulatory Commission standards. Structural designs comply with rigorous ASCE 4 and 43 seismic criteria. Educational institutions like Columbia Basin College even secured federal funding to launch an energy learning center, featuring a high-fidelity simulator of the XE100 control room to train the next generation of nuclear operators. However, while federal regulators at FERC were busy opening up transmission options, state governors realized they still held a powerful trump card in the form of state tax incentives and retail sales jurisdiction. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, navigating a critical swing state political landscape, where average household electricity rates had jumped nearly 14% in a single year, decided to establish a highly aggressive state-level framework. During his 2026 to 2027 budget address, Governor Shapiro introduced the Governor's Responsible Infrastructure Development Standards, also known as the GRID Standards. This initiative is a comprehensive effort to force data center developers to bring their own energy if they want to access Pennsylvania's highly lucrative sales and use tax exemptions on computer equipment. The grid standards mandate that developers cannot simply plug into the existing PJM grid and consume local capacity. They must build, bring online or contract for brand new incremental electric generation capacity located within the same PJM locational deliverability area. The developer must pay 100% of the cost of this new capacity, as well as all associated transmission and substation upgrades. Most notably, the standards mandate that developers must source an escalating percentage of their electricity from dispatchable, clean, firm energy resources located directly within Pennsylvania. The clean, firm target is set at 10.0% for the year 2027, rising to 14.5% by 2030 and hitting 32.0% by 2035. Clean, firm resources are defined to include nuclear energy, geothermal, clean hydrogen, long-duration energy storage, and solar paired directly with utility-scale battery storage. Furthermore, developers must submit a detailed footprint report disclosing their building size, campus acreage, estimated peak electric demand, and annual water consumption. To maintain tax certification, a data center must create at least 50 new permanent jobs on or before the 4th anniversary of its certification, and each of these jobs must pay at least 125% of Pennsylvania's average statewide wage. The developer must also pay a combined annual payroll of at least $1.5 million and utilize state-registered union apprenticeship programs. From an environmental standpoint, every data center with a footprint exceeding 100,000 square feet must be constructed solar-ready, achieve environmental certifications, and use zero-emission energy storage systems or ultra-clean generators for backup power. In conclusion, the digital infrastructure sector entered 2025 facing a seemingly impossible bottleneck, an insatiable, artificial intelligence-driven demand for gigawatts of power colliding with an aging, congested electrical grid and a wave of aggressive state-level regulatory cliffs. But through the powerful combination of federal tax incentives, grid reforms, and private sector innovation, a path forward emerged. Under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, The restoration of 100% bonus depreciation provided a massive cash flow engine. This capital was deployed to exploit the regulatory mechanics established by IFRC's collocation ruling, bypassing the PJMQ. The ultimate realization of this cycle is that the federal rollbacks of green subsidies, combined with strict state-level mandates, did not kill clean energy deployment. Instead, they catalyzed a highly sophisticated corporate arbitrage. By bypassing traditional utility procurement through virtual power plants and funding next-generation nuclear reactors, hyperscalers can connect to the grid years faster while fully internalizing their impacts. For those who command the capital, master the tax codes, and partner with advanced nuclear innovators, the regulatory cliffs of 2025 and 2026 are not a barrier. They are the ultimate competitive moat. In the era of artificial intelligence, the developers who win the race to power will not be those who wait for the grid. They will be those who bring their own. So, here is a question for all of you. If you were the governor of a state with a massive energy surplus, would you welcome these artificial intelligence data centers with open arms to harvest the tax revenue? Or would you enact a moratorium to protect your local power grid from the tech giants? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe, and make sure to check out our other videos about the global supply chain.